Welcome back to The Right Hook here on Newstalk. I'm sure, and you're already doing it, you probably have a few questions for my next guest, Michael O'Leary, Chief Executive at Ryanair. But it is almost to the day, nay the hour, 10 years since I first started on this gig, and I thought it's been an interesting 10 years for me and an interesting 10 years for the airline industry. And Michael said he'd pop into the studio. I thought a good opening question, Michael, might be, in that 10 years, I have consistently tried to avoid flying your airline, instead flying the one in green. Why should I fly with you?
Yeah, you shouldn't. You know, you're rich, you don't mind being delayed, so fly with the green, frequently late airline. But if you're one of the 80 million, like your wife and your daughters, who aren't quite as rich as you are, who want good value, on-time flights and brand new aircraft, then they'll all fly Ryanair. We don't need everybody, we just need most of the people on and off the island, and thankfully we have them.
But it's interesting, like, because I knew you'd say something like that about your competitor. But, like, if I want to get a seat that I can fit in, you want me to beat the world record for the 50-metre dash so I can get on the plane first and get into an emergency row seat. Why don't you just charge me 20 quid for the privilege of sitting in it?
But unfortunately, you know, as you get older and more out of touch, George, we got there about 5 years ago. We now have reserved seating in Ryanair. We have priority seating in Ryanair.
Not 5 years. Now, come on. You didn't have it
priority there 5 years. No, we did. Reserved seating is in almost a year.
Priority booking, I could stand in front of the queue.
Yeah. I'd carry you on myself personally for an extra fiver. Look, because it works. We don't have rushes. There's this mythical kind of mad scramble to get a seat on Ryanair. You can only go through a boarding gate one at a time. You can only get up the steps of the plane one at a time. We've never yet had a mad scramble, and it works. We have the best turnarounds. We have the most on-time flights, and 80 million passengers can't be wrong.
All right, now, they haven't persuaded me to fly, and of course you persuade the rest of the family, so you've only one to go. I was really interested to read that Declan Kidney brought you in to speak to the Irish team. Lo and behold, they had a big victory over Scotland after they listened to you. I'd be really interested in, without breaking confidence, like, what you would sort of say to a group of professional sportsmen coming up to a
that evening, I threatened them that if they didn't beat Scotland, they'd all have to fly Ryanair in future, which of course was the greatest incentive they could possibly get. Look, it was overblown. I think, to be fair to the rugby squads, they've been stuck down in Carton House for 6 weeks in camp. Apart from 2 training sessions morning and evening, they're bored out of their mind, and the management are rightly trying to get some people to go down there, I'd say, just to entertain them. And I have a certain notoriety value. I wasn't going down there to give them a motivational speech. They're professional sportsmen, they don't need it. But I think they wanted different people from different walks of life just to go down and entertain them for an hour and a half. So I arrived down, brought a few in-flight calendars, which probably were far more welcome than my kubla fuckle. Talked to them for an hour and a half. They I got the same kind of silly questions that you asked me about the Ryanair service and all the rest of it, and I batted it back with the same wit and repartee, and I think all I was doing was breaking up the monotony for an hour and a half and getting out of there.
But they're not really silly if a lot of people ask them. They're not really silly questions about Ryanair if a lot of people ask them.
I know. I mean, you get the same kind of questions all the time. You know, like the questions about Ryanair, instead of, well, you know, the fares are great, where do I get them? You get the sort of silly stuff. Well, you know, why can't I get a refund of a non-refundable ticket? Well, because it's a non-refundable ticket. Why can't I bring 2 carry-on bags? Well, because we said there's only 1 carry-on bag. You know, we're like McDonald's. Why can't I have sort of a different Big Mac? You can't. It's a Big Mac. You want a Big Mac, order a Big Mac. If you want a seat at the lowest price of the best airline in Europe, fly Ryanair. If you want something else, frankly, go away, because we don't have it.
No, but that's a reasonable marketing ploy.
Yeah, it works. I mean, we're now the world's most valuable airline. We're the world's biggest international airline. And in an Ireland of great depression and, you know, where everybody thinks everything is going wrong, we are one of the great Irish success stories.
Speaking of things going wrong, the majority of texts coming in here to 53106 are saying, can you fix it?
Could you fix what? The country? Yeah, you could fix the country in about 5 years. But unfortunately, nobody would ever elect me, and I wouldn't even vote for myself. What you need here would be a serious right-wing dictatorship for 5 years. You know, the problem's not intractable. Although, sadly, we spend far too much time talking about the wrong issues, like the bank debt, the property crash. The real problem in this country is we take in an income about 35 billion a year, and we spend about 50 billion a year. We have to borrow 15 billion a year just to survive. And as long as we have to go cap in hand to borrow 15 billion a year, we can't tell the banks to bugger off. You can't tell the bondholders to bugger off. And it's like every household. I mean, you had business difficulties at one stage in your career. If you don't stop borrowing money, and you don't get your spending control your spending or cut your spending to what your income is, then you have lots of flexibility. But until we get there, we're not going to.
But it is serious. Because it sounds great and you're the master of the soundbite, but I mean, if we cut our spending to the level of our income, there'd be queues half around the block to get into a hospital. There'd be, there'd be no teachers in schools, and rubbish. So on and so on and so on.
There's so much old rubbish that goes on here. We can't solve this problem. You can solve this problem. There's lots of things need to be done. Teachers can work harder. Well, you sack teachers who have huge sicknesses, who haven't showed up to work for months on end. Nurses, instead of working 36 hours a week, will work 44 hours a week. We don't need anybody. Nobody has to kind of give six pints of their 8 pints of blood. We've all got to work a little bit harder. And an awful lot of the crap and the inefficiency and the waste that goes on disappears. One of my great hobby horses, and I'd be killed for it, I usually am, is children's allowance. We give everybody in this country children's allowance. I get 4 children's allowances. My wife puts it straight into a savings account for the kids. Why are we all taxing each other about so that you can pay multimillionaires like me and like you children's allowance? Okay, yours are over 21. By all means, we need to direct some help to the people who need help. But you only need a limited amount of help for a certain number of years. You don't need to be getting children's allowance until the kids are 18, free education from when they're 4 until they're 18, and we are wasting all this money, and some of it needs to be cut.
Right, but two things, and maybe it's an age thing, but if you lived in Ireland in the 50s and all that sort of stuff, and you saw them getting the Innisfallen and Cork and going away to Coventry and Birmingham and Dagenham and so on, you have this thing about emigration. You sort of see it that in the modern world as completely fallacious. You don't see emigration as a curse at all.
I don't think emigration exists anymore. I mean, I can remember, in the old days, in the 1840s on the famine ships, there was emigration. People disappeared and they never reappeared. Families were broken up. I know lots of families who have people working in England. They fly back every weekend. There's people who work in Canada, in Australia. They fly back not every weekend, but they fly back pretty routinely. And if the alternative for young people leaving college today is unemployment or school, is unemployment in Ireland, or going across to Australia and working for a couple of years, or to Canada, or to the UK, or to Europe, go work. There's simply no choice, no alternative.
But the number of places that you can go to work are limiting. I mean, in the 50s, Irish people in their, and you don't have to go back to the 1850s, you go back to the 1950s, people in their tens of thousands. But there was an America and there was a Britain. There isn't an America and a Britain anymore.
There's still a Britain. You have free movement of labour to Britain. There's no restrictions at all. There's an Australia, there's a Canada, there is the US. You need certain kind of qualifications now. But our younger people today are far better off. I worked abroad for a year myself. You're far better off working somewhere, whether it's in Europe or further afield, than sitting on your ass unemployed and complaining here in Ireland.
What about...
Why, for example, why in Ireland don't we reduce the dole after 12 months? Why don't you put people back to work?
But you think that if somebody is getting 150 quid a week and reduced to 75, they will instantly go back to work?
No, I don't think they'll instantly go back to work. I think they're given an incentive to go back to work. There is there is certainly a disincentive for people who are on lower paid work in this country. They suffer because the people who are unemployed and claiming the dole and claiming all the allowances and claiming all the health care and claiming, they actually can't afford to go to work. And that's wrong. We need to put people in this country back to work, whether it's in Ireland or it's overseas, and we need to take away the restrictions that prevent them from working.
So, I mean, you said the Jobs Bridge scheme. Were you a fan of that? That instead of giving people the dole not to work, you give them the dole to work somewhere for the dole plus 50
No,
quid.
I think it's nonsense. I think what you should do, instead of any kind of scheme that needs to be manufactured or run by bloody bureaucrats is doomed to failure. I think what you should do is have a scheme in Ireland where an employer takes somebody new on for the first 12 months or the first 18 months, they pay no tax. There's some scheme there where the employers get them tax-free. You don't have to pay tax on them, or the employees don't have to pay tax
But there's 450,000, give or take, Michael. That's a big number for the Michael O'Leary School of Economics that says they can all either go away or get a job. 450,000 is a big number.
It is a big number.
Jack Lynch said that any Taoiseach who presided over unemployment of 100,000 should no longer be Taoiseach.
That's
this
true.
is 4.5 times.
Yeah, but that was at a time when the workforce was 1 million people. The workforce is now 2 million people. I mean, I don't underestimate how difficult it is. We have an offer in with this government for the last 12 months, which would revolutionise tourism, grow traffic at the 3 airports, which has declined each year for 5 years. It would create, and at the airports alone, 5,000 jobs. And we still can't get an answer from the government.
So how would you do that? How would you create 5,000 jobs at the airport?
Add more flights, add more routes, bring more visitors into the country. Light up tourism.
But I don't get, how do you add a stroke? Because that's what you're saying. Add a stroke.
Yep.
You'll bring more visitors.
5 million additional passengers into the 3 airports over a 5-year period.
How?
Add a stroke.
I mean, why?
Lower costs at the airport. We'll add more. We have new aircraft coming. We're doing this every year. This year alone, without growing out in Ireland at all, we'll grow from 75 to 80 million passengers. We've grown from 20 in the 10 years you've been sitting in this seat. We've grown from 15 million passengers in 2002 to 80 million passengers in 2012. That's what we do.
But
we don't do it in Ireland.
Europe. That's right. You don't do it in Ireland.
We don't do it in Ireland because Ireland is now the most expensive airports, the most expensive country for us to fly in, which is why not just us, but Aer Lingus and all the other airlines at the 3 airports have cut traffic in recent years. We have a stupid, inverted policy at the airports here, which revolves around propping up a government-owned, failed airport operator, instead of saying, what the hell do the airlines need? And it should be kind of a commercial agreement. What does Ryanair want? If Ryanair says you can deliver 5 million additional passengers, give them what they want for the next 5 years. And if we fail to deliver those 5 million passengers, penalise us. But at least let us at it.
Is that what airports, the kind of airports you fly to in around Europe do? Because you don't fly to Paris, you fly to somewhere else.
Wrong. That was the old days. We used to fly to the main airports. Most of our growth in the last year has been at the main airport in Madrid, Barajas. Last year, all our growth in Barcelona was at the main airport, El Prat. We used to fly to Girona and increasingly the big airports around Europe need growth because all the flag carriers are falling over. So they're welcoming Ryanair in there. So our growth now is at the smaller airports and at the main airports.
But I could nearly, you brought up some Disney airport. I'd nearly need an aeroplane to get from your airport to Disneyland.
Yeah, you would. I mean, Paris, Vatry, Disney, it's 100 kilometres outside of Paris, but it's 40 kilometres from Disneyland. I mean, it's the main airport. It's the access airport for Disneyland. Now, we only fly there on a glorified charter, but it's linked up with Disney sell the tickets. They want the passengers delivered to Vatry. Hey, we'll deliver the passengers wherever you tell us to deliver them.
I got a lot of texts on it because I had a similar experience. I actually use a carry-on suitcase that's blue and yellow.
Yeah.
Right? What are your carry-on cases? So, because you terrify me. Yeah, when I fly with you, you frighten the life out of me. I go out there about 5 hours before the plane takes off because I'm afraid you won't let me on if I'm a minute late. I go out there with your bag because I'm afraid you won't let me carry it on, so on. But why does it fit in your upstairs thing, but it won't fit in the gadget at the airport?
Because the bag must be the wrong size. Look,
but it's your bag.
But it's not my bag. If it was my bag, it'd fit in the sizer, I promise you. We sell a bag that fits in the sizer. And by the way, our sizers, there's this myth as well that our sizers are smaller than they're actually bigger by an inch on all height.
Well, can I confirm they are?
They are, yeah.
They are, because it fits in your sizer, but it doesn't fit in other people's sizer.
So, like,
it doesn't fit.
There's no reason for anybody flying with Ryanair. There's no reason for anybody flying with Ryanair to be terrified. We're a very simple operation. You show up with one carry-on bag. If you show up with a second one, we'll fine you 40 quid. If you show up on time, you get on board the plane. If you show up late and you've delayed the flight and all the other passengers, you should get fined. But very few people do.
But I don't have a problem with that, actually.
And in actual fact,
I don't have a problem with that.
Nor does 80 million other passengers. It works.
But what I mean, there's Paul Krugman, the economist, was in the Irish Times this morning, and there was an article in the New York Times where, sadly, as he said, it was very sad that people were dying of their own hand because of economic circumstances. And then he said, that's bad enough, but European governments are now attempting to kill the economies by their own hand. Is that your view?
Yes. But remember, European governments are doing what European electorates elect them to do. Bertie Ahern got elected 3 times in this country, because while everybody knew he was running around buying off the world and his mother, certainly by the time of the second or the third election, I was one of the few people out there criticising him at the time. And yet we keep re-electing him because he'd tell us, it'll be goodies tomorrow. We need to face up to some of the hard medicine. We spend more money than we take in. Until we stop spending more money than we take in, this country and this economy is in severe trouble.
So you believe that hardship will ultimately get us out of here?
The faster and the deeper the hardship, the shorter it will be. No question. And every previous recession has shown the faster and deeper the cutting takes place, the quicker the recovery. McSharry, in the famous hockey government, did most of the cuts in 2 years.
So you believe that household charges or water charges just have to be paid?
No, actually, because I think taxation doesn't work. I think it's cutting spending needs to be. I think you need to take out somebody like the McCarthy report, which identified 7 billion worth of cost savings, and we still haven't, 5 years later, implemented any of them. We're talking about setting up an Irish water thing, which would be another bloody NAMA run by the same useless bureaucrats who've been populating the Department of Environment for recent years, and we'll have another layer of bureaucracy on it. We need to cut all that wasted spending.
I was staggered, I have to say, today to read that they were going to set up Irish Water, a subsidiary of Bord Gáis, which was another... Well, I mean, why not set up Irish Water and give it to somebody to run?
Absolutely.
And make a profit. I didn't understand that.
I don't, but you understand it only because it's the same bureaucrats come up with the same rubbish solutions. I mean, why doesn't the Dublin Airport Authority work? Because it's a bloody bureaucracy of civil servants protected by the Department of Transport. Well, Irish Water, what it should be, is something like the Lotto. You bring in the water companies from across Europe, you make them tender to manage Irish Water for a 5-year contract, and at the end of every 5 years, you boot them out and replace them with somebody else, or you put the contract up to tender. We'll set up an Irish Water, and it'll be like NAMA after 5 years. The first thing Irish Water will do is they'll hire a PR advisor, and then there'll be a communications consultant, and then there'll be a lobbying group, and they'll waste half their time going into Dáil committees talking rubbish instead of getting somebody out there who can do the job.
But they did that in Britain and it didn't really work. Privatisation of water didn't really work in Britain.
No, privatisation of water worked in the sense that the water provision in the UK is far more economic now, far more at lower cost than it used to be under the government schemes. But you still have a huge underinvestment over many years. Like the problem, if you take an industry I know well, which is the airports in Britain, they privatised the government monopoly as a private monopoly, and they waited 20 years for the Competition Commission to come in and say this monopoly is adversely affected competition, it must be broken up and sold off. Why don't we do the same thing in Ireland? Like, we're great at copying the mistakes they make in the UK. We never learn from them.
So
why, for example, one of the things we could do in this country to reduce the debt is sell off the semi-state assets. And you get the kind of nonsense we've had with Quilcha. We'll sell off the trees, but we won't sell the land. Why not? Because land in Leitrim is vital. No, it's not. Land in Leitrim is land in Leitrim. It's not going anywhere. And if you could get more money for selling the land, sell the bloody land.
But you can't sell. Come on now. Like, sometimes you go off the wall. You can't actually sell the land and the trees because they're gone then. You never have them back again.
That's sure. So the experience of land in this country is they continuously come back to the marketplace. You sell the land, you sell the trees, you'll have somebody far more efficient than Quilcha operating that land or doing something with the land. It's not like someone's going to lift the land and take it away. The government of this country still runs a bus company that it loses money and subsidises. It still runs a train company that it loses money and subsidises. And it runs an airport monopoly which loses money. And we subsidise it not by transferring money, but by giving a regulator, giving them price increases every year. None of it works.
But you're the high priest of privatisation and capitalism, really, aren't you?
Yeah, because
you believe that works.
Yes. Over time, it has proved to be far more efficient and a far better deliverer. You look at the archetypal capitalism, the supermarkets. The supermarkets deliver food far cheaper than almost any other, the corner store. And I know you have this bucolic view that the corner store, God help us, when you were Bishop found the corner store. The corner store was either selling you food at about 3 times the cost the Tesco's will sell it to you at. Yeah, it works. What doesn't work is public provision of services.
But once upon a time, there were probably 60 types of apple. Just take a simple example. There are probably 60 different types of apple.
Yep.
Now there's only one type of apple. It's the same shape and it has to be the same colour and it has to fit in the same box.
And you know why? Because that's what people want. They go into the supermarket. Actually, there's probably 2 apples. There's the pink ones and the green ones.
Yes,
and they pick the pink because they purchase the stuff. They don't want the gnarled old. I mean, why does I'm a farmer, but why has the kind of the whole natural production never worked? Because you get gnarled old apples with lumps in them, and people don't visually want to buy them. Capitalism works if you allow it to work. It needs to be regulated, there's no question about that, because then you get completely unbridled kind of free-for-all.
Like America. So what you're really proposing is that Ireland become like America.
It would be a far better model. We should certainly move in that direction. Yes.
But if it became like America, people wouldn't be getting looked after in hospitals unless they could pay for it. People would be dying on the side of the road unless they could afford to get a job. Like you don't sound like
cliche. Like America has far lower unemployment than Ireland has. It creates jobs much quicker than we do in Europe, because in Europe we'll pay people to be unemployed. In America they won't. They cut off the dole after 6 months or 12 months. They go get a job. Nobody in America goes. I mean, I think unemployment should be measured here. When Burger King or McDonald's stop hiring, they're still recruiting people flipping burgers. I flipped burgers when I was a student in college. But how many times did you hear people, I'm not flipping burgers, I'd rather be unemployed? You don't have that luxury anymore. Go to work. Make a contribution. Get up off your ass. And those of us who are working, we will have to pay more tax, absolutely. We will have to get less, we will have to get less in kind of handouts from the government. But I think it's absurd that we get things like children's allowance and that every pensioner, of which you are one, why do you all get a free bus pass? It's not like the bus tickets are very expensive in the first place. Pay for the bloody thing.
But I happen to agree about bus passes. But I get the pension, but 50% of it goes in tax, so isn't that reasonable? I also paid for it. Like when you're cribbing away about me getting the pension, I paid for it. I have
no difficulty with the old age pension. I have no problem with the old age pension. We have to provide for people who are either old. We have to make some provision for children. But I have a great difficulty with a flat old age pension. My father, who died last year, and clearly he was the father of someone who was quite wealthy, got an old age pension. He didn't need it. He'd accept himself he didn't need it. But he actually didn't pay for it, but he didn't need it.
What do you mean he couldn't have got it if he didn't pay for it?
Well, he didn't have the stamps or whatever. I don't know the details, but he used to go in and collect his pension. But we need to target provision at those people who need it. And that's not this kind of flat handouts of children's allowances, flat handouts of bus passes and free trains.
In the last 20-odd minutes, you've created more text traffic than anybody else in the last 10 years.
Why I'll never get elected.
No, but it just shows how good you are on radio.
I have a face for it.
I'm sure you've noticed that we have a vacancy on breakfast. Like you've done the airline thing, you've proved you can do it. Would you not like a new challenge in the morning?
No, we have still to double the size of Ryanair from 80 million to 150 million passengers over the next 6 or 8 years. I still want to revolutionise Irish tourism. I want to create those 5,000 new jobs at the airports in the next 5 years, and I intend to continue to try to persuade the government to let me at it. Ryanair is one of the great job creators and success stories of Ireland, and yet the one country in Europe where we're not welcome is Ireland. It's mad.
No, but that's always been the way with the Irish, isn't that so?
Yeah, but I think
they're profiting in its own land. But why does the government not want to? Didn't they promise? Explain to me, and explain to people listening, because everybody seems to remember that they promised to take away the airport tax.
Yeah, and we'd have change and reform. What happened with the government is they get into power. The new minister goes into the Department of Transport. Remember, the Department of Transport owns the DAA. It owns and controls Aer Lingus. It doesn't want a lot of competition from Ryanair. It doesn't want to force the DAA to reduce its high costs because they're terrified the civil service. They've been shown up to be wrong. They've blown 1.2 billion building an empty terminal out of the airport that should never built in the first place. So you're taking on all of that kind of built-in, dyed in the wool bureaucracy that's determined to prove that Ryanair is wrong. Whereas most other European countries, they don't have that history. They welcome us in with open arms, say, what do you need in order to grow here? We need lower airport costs. Last year in Spain, we grew by 3 million passengers. In Italy, we grew another 3 million passengers. We're the biggest airline in Spain. We're the biggest airline in Italy. We're the second biggest airline in Germany. We're the biggest airline in the UK. They love what we do. May not like me, and they're perfectly right, but they love the growth. In Ireland, we can't find a way of working with Ryanair to encourage us to grow.
At 4:30, I did a piece that there were now 3 airlines gone bust in the beginning of 2012. Malev, Air Australia and Spanair. Yeah. In the Spanair one, you came in for a lot of abuse from the people who lost their jobs. Did they blame you for Spanair going bust or what?
No, but they showed up at a demo, and I was there. We jumped in when Spanair went bust down in Barcelona. We stuck another 8 aircraft into Barcelona and took up most of the Spanair traffic. When Malev went bust in Budapest, within 2 weeks, we'd opened up 22 routes out of Budapest, and we'll carry about 2.5 million passengers a day this year. Like, we are huge in those markets. Now, clearly, I think what the unions in Spain wanted was the government to bail them out, and then you have me down there doing a press conference announcing new routes, and Ryanair's coming in, lower fares and all the rest of it, so they had a big demonstration. I was sent out, the media wanted me to take my photograph. They wanted me to cancel the press conference. I said, to hell with them. I don't hold them.
So why do Spanair, Malev and Air Australia go bust? Because they were all budget airlines. I mean, why can they not do it?
No, they were all state airlines. Malev was the Hungarian state airline. Spanair was effectively the Catalan state airline. And because they were subsidised by the government, the EU finally told them to stop giving out state subsidies. And the minute they stopped getting state subsidies, they fell over. I mean, the problem with most of those state producers, and we have the same with the semi-states here, is they become producer monopolies. They exist so that the trade unions and the people they represent within the industry get looked after, and they don't give a shit about consumers. You look at it today. You look at the health service. When the doctors and the nurses are jumping up and down at the minister. The teachers. I mean, I really resent these teachers. I don't know why the minister ever goes to these teacher conferences at Easter. I
asked him that question yesterday. Why does he go?
Yeah, do something different. Don't go. Stop listening to them. I mean, to be fair, I know I had some very good teachers when I was a boy and all the rest of it. But teachers do not work particularly hard. They don't work particularly long hours. They have inordinate holidays that they get paid for, which I think we should actually give them something useful to do while they're on these long summer holidays. And we should all do more.
It's interesting that you talk about teachers when you had such a privileged education yourself. Yeah. I mean, you were at the most expensive school in Ireland.
Well, if that was CBS Mullingar, no. But yeah, I went to CBS Mullingar and I went to Clongowes. And I value the education I got in Clongowes. I think it was one of the things where it was, well, probably CBS was the making of me, but Clongowes added the bit of polish, such polish that I have. But that doesn't mean that teachers shouldn't work harder. It doesn't mean that doctors and nurses shouldn't work harder. It doesn't mean that airline management shouldn't work harder. We have to work harder. Like, we live in a Europe where Europe believes that it operates in some isolated island where, we can just have this nice, our asses wiped for us every day. The Chinese, the Asians and everybody else there outwork us kind of, by a factor of 30 or 40%. And if we compete in Europe, we win, as Ryanair shows. And if we don't compete and we just roll over and expect to get subsidised, we lose.
If I get another 10 years in this gig, will you come in for the 20th anniversary? All right.
It'd be an honour and a privilege. And keep going, because what the great thing about Newstalk is it provides real, unsubsidised competition and an alternative voice to the state monopoly. And that's why I think I support Newstalk.
All right. Michael O'Leary, Chief Executive of Ryanair, thanks for joining me in the studio.
Thanks, George.